Hey guys, welcome back to Say It Louder. I'm your host, Alondra Miranda.
And Jasleen Kaur, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about Islamophobia and how it's affecting our population today. For those who don't know, Islamophobia is the hatred, fear, and prejudice against Muslims. Basically, it's being homophobic, but against a minority, and in this case, it's Muslims.
So today we're going to focus on the genocide that's currently happening in China, which is targeted mainly towards the Uyghur Muslims. After years of oppression, the Holocaust is repeating itself all over again and no action is being taken. I wrote my essay over this and I did a speech, so I've been doing a lot of research on the Muslim genocide that's currently happening in China, and it really surprised me to find out that this has been happening since 2017. Although the media thinks that it's 1 million and the U.S. Department says it's 2 million, it's actually closer to 3 million Muslims in these inhumane camps, and the number is only increasing.
China has actually claimed that these facilities are re-education camps that help train Muslims to find better jobs and become independent individuals, but this is definitely not the case. A statement published by Timothy Gross from The Vox said that as soon as we began to document the re-education centers, there were Chinese government officials deleting what we were finding. The main goal for these officials is to not show any transparency of what's going on inside.
So why? Why are Muslims being targeted? Well, the Uyghur Muslims live in Xinjiang, China, and according to an article by Rushan Abbas, Xinjiang means new territory, and this name alone reveals the government's determination to concise it. China fears losing control of this region because it has such a high demand for energy, and unfortunately, the area where Xinjiang sits is a region filled with energy resources. So there's coal, there's potential wind energy, oil, and gas, which of course are detrimental to their economy. This leads China to want complete control over Xinjiang, which includes the residents. With that being said, all these internment camps are located in Xinjiang and filled with Muslims. In an article by George Friedrich, he stated, Xinjiang's Uyghurs are more distant from China's notional center and seen as culturally more alien and prone to religious extremism. So basically, the Uyghurs are treated differently because they're not like most of those who live in China.
China has tried covering this up for as long as they could, but when satellite images started to appear, they said that these camps are being used to civilize the Muslims, when in reality they're being tortured. Thousands of families are being separated, leading children to become orphans. Once the Muslims are inside these camps, they're forced to go against their religion and recite communist propaganda. Adrian Jens, a German researcher, said that in an attempt to change their culture, they're told to stop speaking their native language and are forced to speak Mandarin. A survivor named Mugul Tursun said that she was forced to sing songs hailing the Communist Party, and if she disobeyed orders, she was electrocuted and it made her whole body shake. She said that they tied her feet with chains that were 11 pounds. The Muslims in these camps are forced to eat pork and drink alcohol, which is against their religion, and they're not allowed to practice their Islamic beliefs. In a sense, they're being brainwashed out of their religion and being killed if they disobey.
All of this just presents the Islamophobia happening in China, but unfortunately, that's not the only place where racism is occurring. Muslim Americans are also victims of Islamophobia, and it's only gotten worse over the years.
We actually have a special guest here today, and her name is May Khatib. She's a Muslim herself, and we're going to get some insight from her on what it's like to be a Muslim in America and how she feels about what's currently going on in China.
Hi guys, I'm May Khatib. I'm a freshman at Barry and I'm majoring in psychology. I'm a Palestinian hijabi Muslim. 25 years ago, my parents moved to America and I was born and raised in Rome, Georgia my whole life.
So May, you've mentioned that you've grown up in Rome for all your life. When did Islamophobia become present for you, and when did you notice that you were different from everyone else?
Well, pretty early on in my life, I knew I was different because most of my friends and surroundings were Christian. I remember when I was in elementary school, when my friends would introduce me to others, they would always say, "This is May, she is Muslim." This impacted me because I felt like my friends were putting a title on me and I would always fear that people wouldn't want to get to know me if they knew I was a Muslim. Some examples that I remember is in elementary school, I had a friend ask me about a fish symbol and if I knew what it meant. And I remember just telling her, "Oh, it looked like a fish," and then she was like, "No, it represents something for Christianity," and she made me feel really embarrassed for not knowing that it had to do with Christianity, but she knew I was a Muslim and she should have just respected it and knew that I didn't know everything about Christianity just as a little girl in elementary school.
Yeah, I just feel like I wish she wouldn't have judged you so quickly, especially because you were so young and you don't know a lot about Christianity, and of course, you being Muslim, it's like harder to learn too. And I just wish that she would have taught you more about it instead of belittling you. That way you're more aware of like other cultures, other religions and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I feel like that's not really your fault because I feel like the school system doesn't really teach you about other cultures and religions. A lot of kids really think at a young age that there's only Christianity or the belief that they follow. So I get where you're coming from because as a non-Christian myself, I felt like there have been times where I was also out of place and I felt judged because I just didn't know much about Christianity. But again, that's no one's fault. That's just the way that a lot of us are raised.
Yeah, I feel like for the school we went to, they heavily would put the atmosphere around Christianity, which was fine, but at times it would make students who weren't Christians feel out of place. One example that I remember is like during the holidays, they would always revolve around the Christian holidays and they would make parties and celebrations. But whenever it was other religions' holidays, they wouldn't really do much for it. Like when I had my religious holidays, sometimes I would still have to go to school or I would have to leave school early because we didn't have an excuse to just leave school on those days, which felt at times a little unfair, and I felt like I couldn't really enjoy my holiday the way I wished because we didn't have a day off from school on those days.
So May, you mentioned holidays, and right now it's the month of Ramadan. Can you please like explain a little bit for those who aren't aware of exactly like what it is?
Yeah, well, Ramadan is a month when Muslims fast for 30 days, and it is a way for us to give charity and to be kind and to purify our souls and just come back with our faith and religion. And it is a month where the Muslim community can come together.
So you mentioned that you guys fast. How exactly do you fast and what times do you guys do that?
Well, when the sun rises, we start fasting, and then when the sun sets, we are able to eat again. So we fast for around 15 to 16 hours a day, and we do this for a 30-day span.
I actually remember in elementary school, May would go to the library instead of the lunchroom when it was lunchtime. So I just found it to be like just crazy because I remember all of us were like really confused.
Yeah, and I remember a lot of friends would be confused and ask me like, why would I have to not eat for my religion? But like at the time, they didn't really realize what Ramadan meant to Muslims.
It's really interesting to hear all this about Ramadan and how you guys fast and everything. So coming back to the genocide that's happening with the Uyghur Muslims in China, how do you feel about that currently, especially since you're taking part in Ramadan and they're not allowed to do that right now?
Well, I find it really sad just because Ramadan is only 1 month out of the year, and growing up I've always heard to take each Ramadan like it is your last, and it always makes me sad to think that some of the Uyghur Muslims could have experienced their last Ramadan without even knowing it. And the fact that they are like forced to not be able to fast, and they make them drink alcohol, and they will rape the woman, and they're not able to pray or recite the Quran, it just feels very unfair, and sometimes it makes me remind myself to be thankful for the fact that, you know, every year I am so far able to fast the month of Ramadan. And I just wish that it could be like that for all Muslims, but unfortunately it's not that way.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really sad that they're not allowed to partake in Ramadan. But in your opinion, as a Muslim, what do you think? Like, why do you think that this is happening, especially towards the Muslim community over there in China?
Well, I feel like Muslims are heavily misunderstood, and we are given this image of being very violent and radical and like extreme people, but in reality we are not like that in any way. And I feel like a lot of countries and a lot of societies try to oppress our beliefs and our rights without actually knowing anything about our background.
Do you feel like the United States has just not intervened because of 9/11? Like, do you feel like 9/11 has affected you in a way that was unfair?
Well, I feel like since 9/11, it has made even like citizens of America create like a really negative image of Muslims, and to like think that we shouldn't be people that are welcomed in this country, which at times has made like certain stereotypes about us. And even on social media, I feel like we are very misrepresented, and people can create these really negative and toxic ideas of us. But in reality, like Islam does not advocate any of that. Like also with Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden, like that has created like an image of what people assume Muslims to be like, but in no way does Islam like advocate ISIS or violence. And it just has made a lot of people think that, you know, Muslims are these radical people, but it's not. And sometimes it can be really sad when you're trying to meet new people or trying to show yourself to people, and they kind of can create this assumption of you without really knowing who you are.
Yeah, and speaking of assumptions, you mentioned that you're a hijabi, so you wear a hijab. And do you feel that since you've worn it, do you feel just kind of like out of place, or do you feel that people are judging you, or how do you feel about that?
Well, even before I was a hijabi, I did experience, racist comments and people making comments about my religion and background, and sometimes people would even say things about, like, my own mother for being a hijabi. But when I became a hijabi myself, like, I did understand the reality of what it was like to be a hijabi. For example, I remember I wasn't a hijabi when I was a little baby, but I did really want to be a hijabi when I was younger. And my mom was going to Walmart, and I went with her, and I decided to wear the hijab that day when I went with her. And I remember when I went with her, just a lot of people staring at me and my mom. And it gave me, like, a reality of what it felt like. And it made me realize how strong my mom was to, like, live in America in a small town and just experience people constantly staring at her and judging at her. But she never let that stop her from practicing her own religion. And then when I actually became a hijabi myself, I heavily would just get stared at by people all the time, and at times I felt like people would create an idea of me or not want to get to know me or meet me, which felt lonely at times and felt sad, but I tried my best to never let that put my hijab at a lower standard.
Lastly, May, do you have anything you want to add, like anything else about like the impact of Islamophobia?
Well, yeah, I think the first thing is that, the Muslim community should have a lot more awareness. And I think that's the biggest reason why we are so misunderstood, is just that when we are talked about, it's usually in a very toxic way. And so it creates a lot of people who've never met Muslims themselves to just assume that they must all be like that. And I myself have, like, never chose to judge Christians, even though some of my own bad experiences have been with Christians, because it has, like, made me practice to not have misrepresentations of people, because it can be really hurtful when you create that idea of people without actually knowing anyone.
Well, thank you so much, May, for being here today. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today and make this podcast.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure to be a part of this.
So with all that being said, if you guys want to spread awareness, you can repost to social media, spread the word to your friends and family, and that would really impact a lot of people. So thank you for tuning into this podcast.
And we'll see you in the next one.